Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Anime Brain Freeze. We are your pixelated hosts.
I am John.
And I'm CC, and this is the show where we review all the anime series from the previous season we did and didn't watch start to finish. Today we're gonna find out if Ufotable managed to break the curse of video game anime adaptions with my review of Tales of Zestiria the X. First, John is gonna explain why it's apparently more difficult than expected to escape the clutches of the nerdtopia that is Akihabara in his review of Akiba's Trip.
Yes, there seems to be a running theme this week between our two shows. I mean, one is based off of a video game, the other is inspired by a video game.
Wait, is Akiba's Trip not like directly related to the video games that came before it?
I found this out while watching it and doing a little bit of side research that it is its own story with its own characters.
So no relation to the games whatsoever, or at least the same setting?
Well, I mean,
background?
you know, all of the Akiba's games take place in Akihabara,
Yeah.
so
Sure.
they have that
should.
in common. But yeah, Akiba's Trip, the animations kind of has its own cast and its own story, and after attempting to play Akiba's Trip 2, which is a very weird game insofar as how it actually plays and controls. I gotta say, Akiba's Trip, the animation is probably the more enjoyable experience.
Okay. Even story-wise?
I feel like on an intellectual level, if you can say that, they're kind of on the same page because Akiba's Trip, the animation, is all about Tamotsu Denki guy. And he's a nerd, like a giant nerd, like you wouldn't believe it nerd. So Tamotsu regularly goes to Akihabara, which, as we know, is the home of all manner of Japanese nerd culture. One day when he and his sister Niwaka are swinging through the town, he's attacked and nearly killed by these creatures known as the Bugged Ones. He's saved by a rebel among their numbers named Matome, and consequently acquires their power. And this newfound strength allows him to aid in the fight against the Bug Ones, but it confines him to Akiba.
How come?
Because plot. Apparently there's this mystical, magical barrier around Akiba that doesn't allow the Bugged Ones to escape. They just want to, take it over and control the electric town.
Also a very convenient way to keep the whole story to a town, a part of the town where there are lots of opportunities for, product placement and cross-promotion.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But yeah, so in order to keep Akiba safe, it's up to Tamotsu and Matome to team up with an incredibly motley crew. There's Tamotsu's own sister, there's this hack job scientist named Tatsujin, and there's this foreigner of questionable origin named Arisa. We never really get pinned down like where she's from, just say, "Oh, I've been all over the place, blah 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 blah."
And she's like an anime foreigner, like what
Yes.
what maybe some Japanese people actually think foreigners are like.
Yes, and she has this weird tick where she says "moi" at the end of her sentences, and I don't know if they're trying to get her to say "moi" like it's French. I don't know. It's weird, man. She's weird. The whole setup's weird. It's goofy and it's fun though. More to the point, can they, save Akiba from the Bugged Ones, or will Tamotsu constantly get sidetracked by every new trend because he has to bandwagon on everything?
Well, wouldn't you, at least for some of the things that he's interested in?
I mean, yeah, but he gets into some really esoteric stuff. Like, okay, you go from like model building and video games and anime and figure collecting to stuff like robotics and ham radios, and it's like,
Excuse me. Is any of, the nerd stuff related to, I don't know, the background of the Bug Ones or the story itself? Is anything of that like necessary to the, I don't know, solution wrap up of the overall plot and, you know, the conflict that he's involved in? Or is it just like, well, look at this! You know this fan shit, right? Aren't you interested in that?
The very short answer is no. The long answer is no, not really. So I don't feel like a lot of that really contributes to the overarching plot simply because, well, in a couple of small cases it does, but otherwise it's like, hey, look at all this goofy nerd shit that I'm into. It's like, okay, all right. I don't want to say it's a show without direction. It just kind of meanders a lot. But yeah, you were mentioning something about product placement earlier. There is an episode where it's like, hey, there's a Street Fighter V tournament. It's not like Asphalt or Concrete Warrior 5. It's just Street Fighter 5. It's just Street Fighter 5. It's like I really hope Capcom wrote Gonzo a nice big check for that. Speaking of Gonzo, let's talk about that. So this show is animated by Gonzo.
A name we haven't really heard in a while, or at least hasn't come to my attention.
So the first episode of the show looks awesome. It looks great. And then it just kind of slowly goes downhill until you get back to the final episode and it looks pretty good again. Suffice to say is apparently this is a strategy that Gonzo has employed in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can attest to that.
But yeah, it has a lot of real rough spots along the way.
Is this just, not well animated? Are the characters off model constantly? What specifically is like the problem? Or is it just shoddy animation in general?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, I feel like the characters don't go off model too badly. It's just everything else just kind of... The main characters don't go off model. It's the side characters that it sort of happens to a lot. A lot.
Well, from what I've seen, I only watched the first 2 episodes, but the fight scenes in both those episodes looked really good. Though at least those stay on kind of the same level, or do they also degrade over time?
Those kind of maintain themselves pretty well, but the fight scenes in the middle of the series, I feel like, kind of decrease in complexity, at least, compared to the first 3 episodes. So that way, they can kind of dodge around that as best they can. Since I was saying, let's mix this up a little bit. Let's talk staff now. The show doesn't really have an original creator other than, the developer of the games, Acquire, who have done other series like Tenchu, Way of the Samurai, and this other PSP RPG called What Did I Do to Deserve This, My Lord? Apparently had a different name that had to be changed due to legal reasons, considering it was Holy Bad Man, What Did I Do to Deserve This, My Lord?
Okay.
Oops. Copyright.
Still an amazing title.
Yeah. It was directed by Hiroshi Ikehata, whose big name claim to fame is Robot Girl Z. If you're familiar with that, it's a show where you take a whole bunch of old super robot series and now they're anthropomorphic robot girls like Mazinger,
sure, why not?
Like Mazinger and Grendizer and Mazinkaiser and
That sounds very anime, yes.
Yes, but apparently he's actually done other work on stuff like Codebreaker, Dog Days, Flip Flappers, which he talked about recently, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, Kill la Kill, Seito Kaiyaku Indomo. So he's been around the block a little bit. Some of the composition and scripting was done by Kazuho Hyodo, who's done stuff like Gun Sword, Hayate the Combat Butler, Gundam Age, and Working. There's still a weird discrepancy in the opinion of Gundam Age. I know I beat this horse into the ground, but might as well bring it up every time the name comes up.
You're probably gonna bring it up again in the next episode for one reason or another, but
I wonder what reason that would be. And the show had music by Endo, who, as far as I can tell, has done literally nothing else.
Okay, not even in other fields?
Not that I could find.
Okay. All right. Well, that happens. I mean,
Yeah,
could just be the debut. I don't know.
sometimes you just get hired out of the blue for one thing, and then kind of like I think when we reviewed Akka, not that he hadn't done anything else, but I believe the sound director, that was like his first time actually doing sound direction, and everything before that was just stuff.
Well, you got to start somewhere, right?
It's hard to really talk at length about this show, I feel like, because, even though it does have its plot point, the bugged ones are trying to take over Akiba, and they go about all sorts of harebrained ways. Like, one way is we'll buy up all of these appliances so that, the markup on them is insane, and then no one will be able to afford their refrigerators and microwaves and rice cookers, and okay. Sure.
Sounds like an incredibly convoluted plan to, I don't know, take over the world. What is their plan even?
Economic warfare? I don't...
All right.
Like I said, this show's direction kind of likes to hop all over the place.
Okay.
So,
is there at least a clear origin to the bugged ones, or...?
No. They kind of try to paint it up as there's an urban legend that the bug ones existed. It's not a legend. It's not a legend. It's very real within the confines of the story.
Maybe a metaphor for something that's going over our heads, or I don't know. For a particular brand of people who frequent Akihabara or something like that.
I mean, every legend's got to have its city. Every city's got to have its legend there.
Okay. Well, maybe.
So why not Akiba as well?
So what was the most enjoyable thing about the show? Because if I'm not mistaken, you actually enjoyed this show, even though on the surface it doesn't sound like, much.
There's really not a whole lot to this show, but I did enjoy it because it sort of revels in its own nerdery, and it puts more than one thing on display. Like I said, one week it might be robotics. Another week might be video games. Another week it might be a certain children's card game where we just change the wording around so it's totally not what you think it is. Oh, wait, yes, it is.
Are they just highlighting that stuff as, oh, look at this. This is cool stuff, and we're having a bit fun with it. We are making a bit fun of it. And, by the way of our main character being a goofball and everything. Or does it really feel like, okay, this show only exists to promote these products in a fun way and nothing else?
I feel like it's sort of celebrating nerd culture in its own way by showing all of these things and saying, hey, while you're in Akiba, look at all of this fun stuff. It's not just a one-trick sort of town. You can find, no matter what you're interested in, hey, you can find something here and you'll find someone who will enjoy it with you. But, just don't expect the supernatural in the real life.
Sure. I wouldn't want to, I think. At least not of that kind. I mean, Akihabara is interesting and everything, but, some weird bug aliens forcing me to stay there forever? No, thank you.
Oh, come on. You wouldn't want to be confined to one place like that for, forever and ever?
No, especially since my Japanese is not good enough for to survive there, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, that might be a little prohibitive.
Yeah. So are there any characters that stood out to you, like, as your favorites? Or is it like, okay, these are all kind of fun, except for that one weird pseudo-foreigner girl?
I feel like just because of what a spaz Tomotsu is, and how he, through his spazziness, still somehow manages to find ways to, save the day. I feel like, he's a pretty fun character, and I liked him a lot.
Is this like another where it's like, oh, the main character is like this, I don't know, the superhero that at some point all the girls in the show fawn over? Is this, does it have like this harem aspect to it, or is it just this character is kind of a goofball and we're just fighting together and that's it, and maybe he just has that one love of interest as the main female character and everything?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I could tell, there was really only one main love interest. Everyone else was just kind of like, yeah, just let whatever has his interest this week out of his system, and he'll be fine. I don't know if this is, obviously it's not a show for everyone because it is kind of all over the place, but if you were interested in the games, this will probably feel very at home. If you just want to see something that never takes itself really seriously at all, because it never really does, to be perfectly honest with you, it's a fun time. And you can at least, I hate really using the phrase turn your brain off, because I feel like that's kind of become a catch-all when you have trouble describing something, but you say, oh, just turn your brain off and it's great. Yeah, well, it's just, if you don't think too hard, it's a fun show.
If you concentrate on the hijinks, the fights, and the gags.
Right.
And you are interested in, all the nerd stuff that's actually in that show, I guess that helps.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not a nerd, then you don't really have a reason to watch this show.
Our main character in Tales of Zestiria the Cross, not the X, a boy named Soray has been leading a peaceful life among a tribe of seraphim. These spiritual beings, who coexist with the humans on the continent of Glenwood, can only be seen and heard by human beings with enough spiritual resonance. Whatever that means. After a fateful encounter with Alicia, a girl from the capital of the country Highland, Soray and his seraphim buddy Mikleo are traveling to said capital called Lady Lake. However, when they arrive, they are immediately mixed up in an incident that involves a sudden surge of malevolence. Throwing all those terms out there, stay with me. Which is an impurity generated from the negative emotions of humanity, which is plaguing the lands. Soray ends up pulling a sacred sword from a stone and forms a contract with a seraphim called Lila, which grants him the power of a shepherd, a legendary warrior who can, in this case, withstand the malevolence and purge the creatures transformed by it into evil monsters called Hellions. So together, Soray and a growing number of companions set out on a journey to finally rid Glenwood of malevolence and to create a world where humans and seraphim can live in peace.
A sword and a stone. A magical lady. This sounds a lot like, Excalibur and Lady in the Lake, but, I could be wrong.
Yeah, so this is based on the game by Namco Bandai. They have the long-running RPG series, of Tales of games, which, always have a different end name, but it always starts with Tales of. And they're always pretty much in a different setting, but it's all fantasy-based. So this is the same for this. This is even more feels like a classic fantasy setting. There's not even any steampunk stuff into it, which some of the other games have. But yeah, this is pretty classic fantasy stuff. And like John, you already noticed with a lot of references to Arthurian legend. Yeah, Lady Lake, the Sword in the Stone, and all that stuff is pretty much the most obvious things. But there are also some other little nods here and there. Let's go into the show itself and start with, a familiar topic because we just talked about Akiba's trip in that regard, kinda. Because, of course, this is also a video game adaptation, and video game adaptations are tricky. Akiba's trip chose to, use the setting of the games, but, use completely different characters, like you said, and, its own story and everything, which is the more easy and wise choice in these cases, I guess. Because if you want to do a direct translation from the game to the, anime, this, there are some problems in that and some difficulties. Let's say for fighting game adaptations, it's sometimes hard to come up with, something worthwhile in the plot department.
Unless you have an actual, lot of lore that you can fall back on, unlike something like, say, Street Fighter, which is like, oh, these things happen, and, yeah, it's hard to build on that.
Yeah, but even when those fighting games are heavily plot driven, like for example Blaze Blue that recently got an anime adaptation, that doesn't guarantee an interesting or cohesive narrative. Also, the animation and fights in that adaptation were shit, which didn't help. But lots of problems with that. For RPGs, for example, it's difficult to condense sometimes 50 hours plus experience with all its side stories and small bits of character development into standard anime length. And Zestiria, from what I can tell by having watched only the show, because I haven't played the game, I think that's still in your backlog?
Yeah, I realize the Tales games are, not connected in any way. Well, most of them aren't. And that, you can play them whatever order you want, but I'm trying to, finish the older games before I get around to that, because I still have that and Berseria to play.
Yeah, sure. Then we get to Berseria later.
Yes, we will.
Anyway, from what I can tell from only watching the anime, Zestiria is suffering from exactly that problem of having like a huge sprawling RPG stories with lots of character moments, lots of side stories and everything, which, the Tales games have, at least from, what I can tell, what I played of. I played Tales of Destiny, I played Tales of The Abyss, which I think the latter one being one of the most highly regarded games in that series. And those always have like, some of the most interesting stuff doesn't happen in the main plot, where you learn more about the characters and everything. So, it's a problem to maybe sort out what in that huge ass of a game is relevant and should be in the anime, and, how to make that work in terms of pacing and everything. So, stuff, doesn't feel like it's haphazardly thrown in there. So, even if Tales of Zestiria, The Cross, got 2 seasons instead of 1, 25 episodes, it still suffers, from mismanagement in that regard, I think. So, the show mainly focuses on Soray's quest and how the 2 main female characters, Alicia and Rose, play into it. In terms of character development, surprisingly, Alicia and especially Rose get the most out of the show's runtime, in my opinion. Rose probably got the best arc in the show. I was kind of surprised by that, considering the hate she got when gamers found out that Alicia wasn't a single main female character or something. I don't quite remember how that shit, all that clusterfuck all happened, but there was something brewing there when the game was released.
What a shitstorm. Oh my god.
Do you have a bit of more insight on that, John? Because I'm not quite sure on the details. I don't know what people were that mad about.
Well, I think it was simply that, in all of the promo materials and in that OVA that they aired before the game came out, they were playing up Alicia to be, the big main heroine alongside Soray, and then apparently when she left the picture very early on, a lot of people felt really burned by that, and it was like, okay, you gotta calm down, guys. It's just a video game. But, some people got really mad about it. So mad, in fact, that apparently that was about the time that Hideo Baba was shuffled out of Bandai Namco and Tales Studio. And at some public event, when they were issuing, an apology about it, he wasn't on stage to give the apology. It was Rose's voice actress, Mikako Komatsu, that gave the apology. Like, that seems... What? Why?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Japan,
fanboys,
we need
man.
to have a talk, Japan.
It's not like Japan has the only crazy fanboys, let's be real. Over here, it's usually the comic book guys who get upset over, movie adaptation shit and stuff like that.
I mean, yeah, but to that degree?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's on a Japanese level, so...
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I think that's super dumb. Also, well, I guess the anime is a bit different in that regard, or people were like not playing the game a bit farther than the beginning parts, because Alicia in the anime later returns to the group. So I don't know if that doesn't happen in the game, if they changed that maybe because of the outcry from what they did with her in the game, and then maybe we're like, okay, in the anime we put her into the, we let her feature into the plot more, prominently later on again, so to make up for what, how the game upset the fanboys. But I don't know, like I said, her and Rose's stories are probably the best ones, so it feels like they were already, plotted out and a more substantial part of the game. So I'm not sure about that. If you play the game, please tell me.
I plan to eventually.
Yeah, what if that part is any different from the anime? If she does return, if she doesn't. Anyway, like I said, I don't know. I can only judge the anime by itself. Yeah, so let's get back to the anime. So Alicia, like I said, Alicia and Rose's stories are alright. Everyone else gets the short end of the stick. The Seraphim that Sorey meets on his journey and that he forms contracts with to add their, magic powers to his weapon arsenal have like these paper-thin backstories. Edna, who's like this powerful, I think, Earth-based Seraphim. Her motivation is like related to her brother, but that is like the focus for one episode, and then it doesn't get brought up again or really wrapped up by the end.
God,
it's like you get one scene right before the finale, and then right after it, and it's like, okay, better be happy with that. It feels like that was probably one of the side quests in the game that just got dropped on the, for the sake of just moving the main plot forward. It's like, we don't have time for this. But yeah, it feels, resulting from that, it feels like her character is, has really lackluster development or nothing at all. And Mikleo is Sorey's friend. That's it. That's all of his character. He cares for Sorey. The end. No arc. No real development. Whoop-de-doo. It's kind of sad. I was expecting something. And they make like an attempt of, sending him on kind of a separate journey for a while, but it's not like he has, a major revelation about himself or anything, or does like some soul searching that is super interesting. Yeah, it's just like, no, I need to find a power to support Sorey, and that's it. I'm like, okay. And that's it for the rest of the series. There's nothing more. He's just there and helps Sorey, and that's it. Okay. Layla is like Jean's sister in Aka. She's there. I mean, she's important in the way that she gives Sorey, his shepherd powers and everything. So, she's in there for the main plot, just like, Jean's sister was. I can't even remember her name now, and there's a reason for that.
I believe it was Latte.
Yeah, they even start with the same initial, so it all makes sense. Anyway, so yeah, she's only there to give, from the first contract with Sorey, make him a shepherd. But aside from that, she doesn't really do anything except, spout some exposition, talk very politely, smile a lot, stand around like a pretty doll. Yeah, that's pretty much her character. Dazzle, like one of the Wind Seraphim, is probably the best because his story is like heavily intersected with Rose's, which makes sense because her story is the best one in my opinion, or her arc is the most interesting for her. But again, we learn so little about all of these characters and what makes them tick and where they came from and everything that it felt hard to connect to them. And that's kind of bad, especially in terms of one character and what happens to him and everything. I won't go into details because of spoilers. But, at least for me, it was kind of hard to feel for them. It was like, okay, these characters are important to me. These characters matter because we barely knew anything about them. But the worst offender in that regard is Sorey himself.
Oh, no.
And since he's the main character, that is super bad. He's the blandest fucking chosen one protagonist I've come across in quite a while. It's agonizing. Like he wants world peace and travel the lands and find some ancient ruins and everything, and that's it. I mean, the world peace thing is admirable. Don't get me wrong. but it's not much to go on when it comes to what makes an interesting main character. He barely has any flaws besides being an inexperienced shepherd. And even then, he handles himself pretty well in most of the fights, as far as I could tell. So he's not, like I said, he's not really flawed. He always has, like, this clear goal in mind. He never falters, never questions himself or his methods. He's always nice. He gets along with all of his companions. He is so goddamn bland and boring.
Couldn't you ask for a more perfect hero?
We've seen so much of that, especially in fantasy and everything, that, we don't need this. We really don't need this. This is so boring. It's like I've seen this a million times, especially in Chosen One narratives. Like, he's got no edges whatsoever. And while I bet it would be nice to, like, hang out with that guy and talk to him and everything, he's not the protagonist you need or want in a riveting fantasy story. Not at all. The main plot also moves at a pretty slow pace and doesn't really go anywhere new or interesting. It's like the standard, let's rid the world of evil by stopping people from hating each other and starting wars, blah, fantasy story. With a big evil end boss in the final episode who we barely see before that, and who gets like 90 seconds of background story.
You know, that seems to be a thing with a lot of JRPGs as of late, is like this like 11th hour villain reveal, and it's like, okay, you're there, but we don't know anything about you. There's not enough time to get to know anything about you. Because, I mean, there's two games I can pick out of the top of my head that I played recently where that happened, where it was Fate Extra and Persona 4. And Persona 4 does it twice, by the way.
Oh, God.
Because there's the one ending and then there's the true ending where it's like, suddenly, blah, I was here manipulating everything all along. Motherfucker, what?
Sounds like Naruto. Like, Naruto did that, like, with every new arc. There's like, oh, no, I was the one pulling the strings. And then the next arc, no, I was pulling the string. And then by the end, it's like, no, mother was pulling the string. Anyway.
But yeah, and with Fate Extra, it's kind of like, oh, you've won the Holy Grail War. Time to go up to the moon cell and have your wish granted. You gotta beat me first, bitch. Who the fuck are you? Doesn't matter. Spoilers.
Doesn't matter, boss.
Spoilers for Fate Extra. It's whatever, however old it is.
But yeah, okay, to be fair, the main bad gets of Tales of Zestiria, the Cross gets at least introduced like halfway through the series, but
okay.
But after that point, we don't meet him until the final episode, and there's like no further introduction to his characters. Like, okay, here's this big bad guy, we don't know anything about him, and then after, beating the shit out of our main characters, I believe, or something like that, he just disappears and then appears in the final episode, and then we get like 90 seconds or something of his background story, which is not particularly interesting, and it's like, okay, beat the fuck out of him, Saray, and then the end, and it's like, yeah, well, that's not how you get me emotionally engaged in this confrontation, people. Not at all. And I wonder if the game did a better job at that, like, because I would be surprised if not. I know there are always different people working on the different, iterations in the Tales franchise, but remembering playing Tales of the Abyss, the main bad guy of that story is actually pretty well developed. I really enjoyed that, especially him starting out in a different way, and you are not aware that he's a bad guy and everything, and then twist and his motivation, and it's all pretty clear, and you learn a lot about him from one of the other characters, and it's all pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
And it gives him a lot of depth, and it makes the confrontation matter more and more interesting. And Tales of Zestiria the X, the Cross, has none of that, and I wonder if that's like an anime only problem again, and if the bad guy in the game got a lot more interesting backstory. I don't know. Again, I wonder if, someone out there in our, in our listener base played the game and can, tell me before you play the game, John.
I'm sure someone else will have gotten to it before me.
Yeah, if someone who has played this can elaborate on that. Is this a problem in the game? Are these problems in the game with the story, or is this like Is this something that happened through the adaptation? Like, there are also some side characters that you think will play a bigger role in the plot, but who just get, tossed aside after popping up once or twice, and their inclusion feels like wasted time. Like there's this character in the beginning, and I'm gonna spoil this because trust me, it won't affect you emotionally either way. There's like this Hellion character in the beginning that our heroes fight like in the 3rd episode or something, and you're like, oh, okay, he's gonna play a big role in the anime, and then he doesn't appear for like, I don't know, 7 episodes or something. Then he pops up, does nothing, disappears again, and then he pops up like in the final episode or the one before that, does some weird suicide attack and dies, and none of the characters even are on screen for that.
What?
They just find him laying dead or something and don't remember him. I think it's like, okay, I guess this is sad. This would be sad if we knew anything about this fucking character. Why did you even show me that? It doesn't matter. It doesn't resonate emotionally in an emotional way. Who is that guy? Why should I care? Why should I give a damn? I don't know. But apparently they felt it necessary to, make us show this. And I wonder if he got also some background story in the game as well, which we didn't get in the anime. It's weird. It's a clusterfuck. It's like, okay, here's a bunch of characters, but you won't give a shit. No time spent on them.
This all sounds really unfortunate because, a lot of the past Tales adaptations were... I didn't watch Tales of the Abyss. I played through it, but I heard it was pretty good. And I mean, as far as I had seen, the consensus was on the Symphonia OVAs they were also pretty solid. So it kind of sucks that this one just kind of sounds like it falls very flat.
Yeah, that's weird. And that's especially sad for another reason, which I will get to later. Anyway, but yeah, speaking of wasted time, for some reason they decided to switch to a different game for 2 episodes at the beginning of the show. Episode 5 and 6 take a peek at the story and characters of Tales of Berseria, which is a game that came out after Zestiria, but is set in the world of Zestiria, only like 1,000 years before the story of Zestiria happens. So it's basically like the prequel.
That marketing, man.
Yeah, that's what I assume. They did that to cross-promote with the game, because that was just being released when the Zestiria anime hits. So it makes kind of sense in that way?
A friend of ours kept asking me several times, did you watch this week's episode of Tales of Berseria? And it's like,
But yeah, the problem is it doesn't add anything. It just puts a full stop to the main plot, what little there is of it, and shows us characters we will never meet again for the rest of the show. And even though Velvet Crow, the main protagonist of Berseria, and her story are kind of relevant to what happens in Zestiria, the connection is barely mentioned in like 1 or 2 throwaway exposition sentences pretty late in the run of the show. And honestly, it's not that important. Yes, it's got something to do with the malevolence and why it plagues the lands. But you didn't need to know that. Like, it's not necessarily for the story of Saray and his journey and everything. Like, evil force that stems from bad human emotions is all the explanation we would have needed in the context of what Zestiria is trying to say, which is not a lot, but still, not necessary. And it's a shame that they, wasted 2 episodes for the sake of cross-promotion instead of, giving some of the characters who are actually in the main plot and in the main story some very, very heavily needed additional development and character depth. And yeah, that's so beyond me. It's like, okay, let's put like this random shit from the past that doesn't really like add anything, elaborate on anything in there instead of add some interesting character bits. Or, more background story or whatever. It's, I don't know, not worth it. I don't know. Responsible for the script in this show was Hikaru Kondo, who has mainly been a producer on shows like God Eater and Fate Zero. Yay! He wrote some episode scripts on Kyoto Ragtime Show, but aside from that, this seems to be his first major writing gig, and maybe that's the reason for the lame story and lack of characterization. I don't know. Maybe he had some trouble deciding what in the game is the important stuff, that needs to be in the anime. I don't know, find a good balance between character and story and everything and main plot, and I don't know, maybe like I said, maybe the story and the characters of the game were already shit and he wasn't able to save it. I don't know. Like I said, I haven't played the game. If we have any listeners who did play the game, please let me know if they fucked up the adaptation or if the source material is already this unsalvageable, bland fantasy pudding. I can't tell. It could be either reason. I don't know. So yeah, by now you are maybe wondering and saying to yourself, wow, CC seems to hate the shit out of that show. Why did he watch it all to the end? Well, there's a good reason for that. And I wanted to leave that for last because if I can, I like to end my reviews on a positive note. So, this series is one of the prettiest, amazing looking, incredibly well animated anime TV shows I've seen ever. The character models are super sharp. As far as I can tell, they were always on model. The colors are incredibly vibrant. There is a lot of nice lighting, a lot of nice shading. There are great particle effects. There's a great camera work in the fights. And please brace yourself. Because remember who is talking here.
Uh-oh.
It has good CG.
What?
Mind blown. So yeah, the combination of CG and traditional 2D animation is in this show is the best I've seen so far on a TV budget. Yeah, there's some rough spots. For example, when a 2D Soray runs over some CG cliffs and the camera pans around in a wide arc. The turn of his character model can't quite keep up the same frame rate as the CG.
Oh, it's really hard to get that right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been done 1,000 times in anime, and it seems like no one has ever really quite nailed that sort of shot.
Yeah,
so.
But I can forgive that. And that is really one of the few bits where the CG left a bad impression, which is super rare in a TV anime, especially for me. The locations are big and detailed. The CG on that is also pretty much gorgeous and incredibly clean looking. The fights are action-packed with a lot of impactful moves. They make some good use of the freedom that is, gained through the CG by using a vivid camera. The director, Haru Sotozaki, has worked as animation and episode director on a lot of stuff like Naruto, Fullmetal Alchemist, Inazume 11, The Woman Called Fujiko Mine, and on the key animation on projects like Wolf's Rain and the Cowboy Bebop movie. So he knows his stuff, and it shows. The direction in this show, especially in the fights and in some of the establishing and environment shots, is really great. It's really, really great compositing, real good combination, in my opinion, of CG and 2D animation. I think some people might see it differently. It's no, this still jars and this still, doesn't work as well. But I think the CG is on a really good quality level for TV, really high. And like I said, there was barely any moment where it's this doesn't, look as good as it could. But man, I was really impressed with the visuals in the show, and that's what kept me going. It's I watched an episode and I was man, this looks so good. And then, the story hits and the characters are oh god, this is so boring and dumb. I think I'm gonna watch after this episode. And when the next episode was released, I was oh man, this show is so boring. But man, it looks so fucking good. So yeah, I kept watching until the end because I just was wondering what the visuals had in store for me. Sometimes, apparently, that's enough to keep you going. And it definitely was for me. The final episode is not really up to par, at least in terms of fight choreography and overall animation quality, in my opinion. But maybe by then they were running out of budget. Maybe it wasn't supposed to have a 25th episode because it was aired, I don't know, 2 weeks or a month later after the 24th. I don't know what was up with that. So I guess there was some trouble with the production, or it wasn't planned at all. I don't know. Who knows? If you know, tell me.
Well, I mean, UFO Table has done that in the past, haven't they?
I don't remember. Maybe.
Wasn't it with God Eater that they did that?
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, but with God Eater, I definitely know it was some production troubles because they couldn't, like... They like this. The production on this was so involved and difficult that they couldn't just get the episodes done in time, so they had to postpone it. I don't know if that was really the case with Zestiria. But yeah, mentioning UFO Table, it looks like either them or Bandai Namco threw a lot of money at this project. Like, and you can see it. You can pretty much see it in every episode. It's beautiful. I doubt it paid off. Like. I don't know how many people watch this show and if this was a huge success, but man, the story and the characters don't deserve it. And on the visuals alone, yeah, maybe a one-time watch, but I don't know if many people like stayed with it and like waded through its blandness for the sake of the visuals alone. I mean, the soundtrack is also alright. It's done by the game composers of the series Go Shina and Motoi Sakuraba. Seems a better fit for a game though. Because sometimes it becomes a bit too overbearing, when suddenly, you know Sakuraba's music style from the other Tales games. Like suddenly, he's like this. He loves to use like these blaring loud horns and choral orchestra, and when that happens in the games, it mostly works. But sometimes when that happens in the anime, when suddenly, fight scene, and now we need this like weird. This wild music track, like this really loud, and it's like that came out of nowhere. And I don't know, it doesn't fit as well in the anime as it does in the game, but it's still a mostly good soundtrack. So,
I mean, when you have a pre-existing soundtrack to pull from, obviously, that makes the job a little bit easier. Going back to, Persona 4, all of its animated adaptations, most of the music was, stuff that was repurposed from the games, and they made it work well, so...
But that's also interesting. If you mentioned Persona again, you played both Persona 4 and watched the anime, I believe?
Yes.
Both of them? Also the normal one and Golden?
I didn't play the original Persona 4, I just played Golden.
And the anime? I think there were 2 anime adaptations,
right. I'm sorry. Yes, I watched both those series. They did some different stuff in Golden than they did in the game, though, so...
Okay. But did they get the most important stuff from the game into the anime? Or was it like, okay, this is missing some integral stuff?
They hit all of the key story beats, but, since it was a much shorter series, there was a lot of stuff that they had to gloss over.
I wonder how much got glossed over for the adaptation of Zestiria. I imagine a lot. I don't know if the story in the game was completely shit, and if the adaptation just couldn't salvage it, or if, there was still some merit in the game story, and the adaptation fucked that up. I don't know. So if you want a fresh and interesting fantasy story with engaging, well-developed characters, this is totally not the right show for you. Well, not at all. If you, for some reason, want to test out or show off your new TV with super crisp, colorful, and really well-animated anime eye candy, maybe try to find out which episodes have the best fights. I think episode 3 is a highlight in that regard. And then just watch that and be done with it. I don't know. For more interesting stuff, more interesting fantasy stuff, you need to look elsewhere. Because aside from the visuals, this show was a blunt, rusty sword. And that is a wrap on the 30th episode of Anime Brain Freeze. All the music in our show is from the Double Dragon Neon soundtrack by the amazing Jake Kaufman. Please go to vit.bandcamp.com and check out his awesome work. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and animebrainfreeze.com. Leave us comments and questions anywhere you like, or send us an email to animebrainfreeze@gmail.com. We would love to read your feedback. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you had a good time, and please join us again on our next show. Macht's gut.
Take care, everybody.
Next time on Anime Brain Freeze.
The story of a fallen angel? Or maybe she's just a little misguided.
And we grab us a bunch of orphans, shove them into giant mechs, and throw them at the front lines. Because we are horrible people.